Hi, I'm Fu-Tung Cheng, author of Concrete Countertops and Concrete at Home. I am so excited to introduce to you our step-by-step streamlined process for creating concrete countertops with this instructional video. The concrete countertop that you create can be as imaginative and as unique as you want it to be. I found that homeowners, do-it-yourselfers, designers and architects, as well as concrete professionals, carpenters and woodworkers are all drawn to concrete for its earthiness, for its mass, its versatility, and most of all, for its potential for creative expression. My first book, Concrete Countertops, has sold over 100,000 copies. With its success, and with the popularity of our 1- and 5-day seminars, I have seen many beautiful countertops produced by all sorts of folks, from amateurs to seasoned concrete professionals. Whether you're a professional on your way to creating a new business, or simply a homeowner wanting a countertop for your own kitchen, this video is an important step in creating your first concrete countertop. I've created a simple, easy, one-step process called Pro Formula. It's as easy as baking a cake. With Pro Formula, all the guesswork of weighing out separate ingredients is eliminated, so you can concentrate on the craftsmanship and the creativity in the mold work, and be assured that the concrete will be countertop quality and not crack, spall, or crumble. With the ease and convenience of my Pro Formula and this video, I'm sure you'll have all the confidence and the tools to produce a successful, beautiful countertop. So let's get started. Before we build a countertop, we have to build what's called a template. A template is built to mirror the exact conditions in a kitchen. Oftentimes, we'll find that the walls are out of square, so the template will conform to that and inform us exactly how to build the countertop. Now, a template is very easy to build. We're building our template out of 3-inch wide strips of Luan. This makes for a lightweight, rigid, easy to handle template that also makes sure that your measurements will be completely accurate. Cut the strips 1 inch shorter than the length and depth of the countertop. This will give us some play in our corners, so we will not have to trim these pieces again. Now lay the back strip on the counter and push it all the way to the back. Repeat this step with the front strip. If you are going to have an overhang on your countertop, account for it by measuring and moving your template to where the overhang will be. Now place the cross strips down exactly to fit, and then mark a registration line on the front and back strips. We can now begin to glue the template together. Remember to go slowly and work on one area at a time. Be sure when you stick them together to get them exactly where they need to be, because it will be difficult to pull them apart. Go around the template and glue each corner while carefully laying down the end pieces of the Luan. Add some cross bracing to keep the template rigid. Now mark the front, back, and sides clearly on each strip. Record any other information onto your template. This includes information about the cabinetry, the walls, and the substrate. Measure and mark where the sink will be located, in this case 14 inches from the edge of the countertop. Because this will be created upside down in our mold, we must now transfer all of our information to the back side of the template. Well, we just came from our demo kitchen and brought over our template, which we have all the markings for the conditions that we found in the field. And what we like to do is take the dimensions from the template and put it into a schematic drawing. On the schematic drawing, I have, just as we have the measurements written down on the template, a 73-inch by 25.5 inch countertop. We decided that it was going to be 2.5 inches thick. Now, this thickness is completely arbitrary. It could be anywhere from 2 to 3 inches. We chose 2.5 inches because we like to show the thickness in contrast to other countertop materials. Everybody is so used to seeing countertops at 1.5 inches on top of a box, and that is that strict, ordinary look that you see everywhere. And our concrete, by contrast, looks better when you have that sense of mass. So in this case, we used 2.5 inches. The other features that we are showing and we're transferring from our template are the location of the sink here, the knockouts that we have for the various things like faucets or air gap for a dishwasher or a soap dispenser. Those would be in and located behind the sink. The third feature is this depression in the countertop that we are going to inlay a cutting board, sort of a sliding cutting board as an example. And finally, the seam. The seam is very important here. We're showing a seam in this rather short countertop to demonstrate what you would do with a very large 8-foot or longer countertop. You need to put a seam because it's very unwieldy after 8 feet to move around a countertop and try to install it. So this seam, if you notice, is at a slight diagonal. I like to feature the seams a little differently off of the 90 degrees so it doesn't look like a seam, it becomes a graphic element or a design element in your countertop. So these are the features, and then also we're going to write down other things like the formula and our color. We chose wine, and we'll put these things in your schematic design sheet. Now let's talk about the emotional appeal of concrete countertops. What is it that makes concrete countertops so appealing? Well, in my mind, it's how real it feels, the mass of it, the way it can complement other materials, and especially the way that you can have creative versatility in manipulating the shape and form of it into beautiful curves. Or you can change the surface by creating inlays, you can create elevation changes such as drain boards. It's really up to your imagination. Now let's talk about color. It's no accident that I have these stones here because they really reflect what we are trying to do in providing colors for concrete countertops. They are natural, timeless things that you would find in nature, and they complement all sorts of different materials. So they will complement other materials in your kitchen, such as wood or the cabinets, and they also would go well with the inlays that you decide to put in your countertop. Now, once you've selected your color, then it's time to choose the colored aggregates that we provide. In our case, for this countertop, we've chosen jadeite. These will be scattered on the bottom of the mold, and then you pour the concrete on top of it, and then when it's flipped upside down, we will grind it, and it will reveal some of this aggregate. With the colored aggregate, you also go to the thing, my favorite part of the countertop making process, which is the personal inlays. For instance, I'll find semi-precious stones that have been already polished, flat like this, and I'll put these in the mold. Or else I'll find something like a car part at the flea market and embed that. And this we're going to put in our countertop today for an example. You might find mosaic tile at the tile shop. Beautiful mosaic will complement the concrete if you put them together in a drain board, for example. Or you might select something like a little bracelet, and it can be ground into the countertop. A piece of wrought iron. Anything in your imagination that is flat and can be put in the mold is suitable to personalize and customize your countertop and make it your own. Let's get to the nuts and bolts of exactly how much concrete you're going to need to make the countertop and how much pro formula will go with that concrete. So we have 25.5 by 73 width and length, and then we decided that it would be 2.5 inches thick. So we multiply the three numbers, 2.5 times 25.5 times 73, and that gives us the cubic inches of the amount of concrete that would be in this countertop. Now, of course, there is a void here, so that gives us a little leeway, and we want a little leeway. You do not want to calculate it too tight. When we multiply these three together, we get some 4,653 cubic inches, and you divide that by 1,728, which is the amount of cubic inches in a cubic foot, because we want to get down to how many cubic feet of concrete, or a fraction thereof, do we need? Well, when we calculate this, we get 2.7 cubic feet. So we like to round up to the nearest cubic foot. So let's say 3 cubic feet is what we need for our countertop that we're going to pour today. Once you have that calculation, you select the Pro Formula mix box that will be appropriate. In this case, we have our 3 cubic foot box. It says so right here, 3 cubic feet. And this would be the box we'd use in its entirety for this countertop. Now, if we had a countertop that was 4 cubic foot, let's say, then we would have to add another cubic foot of our Pro Formula mix. And the other container size we have is for 1 cubic foot. So you would just add this one box to the 3 cubic foot for 4 cubic feet. Now, one very important thing to remember throughout the process is that we're pouring our countertop into a mold. And when we release it, the bottom of the mold becomes the top of the counter. So before we cut, everything must be transferred to a mold plan that is created upside down. From our mold plan, we now need to draw up what's called a cut sheet. A cut sheet details exactly how much material we will need. In this case, one 4x8 piece of melamine will be cut into the various sizes seen here. The material we're using for the mold is called melamine, and you can find it at almost any building supply store. Of course, you'll need a table saw to cut the melamine, so if you're lucky enough to have a shop, you'll use your table saw to cut it. Another option is to have a cabinet shop cut your pieces. Just bring in your cut sheet and have it cut there. If you have an out-of-square template, lay it upside down on the melamine and transfer the dimensions to the bottom section of the mold. Draw a line representing the out-of-square angle, then use a circular saw to cut the melamine. Now it's time to build our melamine cutting board knockout. Our plans call for a 4-inch gap between the edge of the countertop and the sink. So take your sink knockout, trace a line onto the melamine, then use a jigsaw and carefully follow the line to make your cut. Also, where the two walls meet on each side of the divide, we'll need to make a bevel cut using a miter saw. We've just come from the cutting table, and we've got our pieces here, and we are assembling them on the mold making table. It's very important to have a strong mold making table that's level, strong and level. So if this is your first time and you're just using sawhorses, make sure that you have sufficient number, strong enough to hold the weight, but level is the most important of all. So take your level, double check whenever possible, double check on all corners, and make sure it's level. All right, now that comes the critical part. We're taking our template and determining the orientation. Remember, we marked on the front of the template, on the top side, that this is the front edge. So I am determining that this will be the front edge in the mold. So since everything is poured from the bottom, we are flipping this. And you see I've marked front, back. I'm going to lay my template inside here, and now I know this is the orientation, the proper orientation for the mold on the table. Once I do that, I'm going to push this mold together and just double check to see how accurate our original cuts were. So here we have the division and put up the edges, and our bevel cuts come together at the separation. They come together here at the separation. There's enough room in the corners, so everything is covered. So I know that the cuts were accurate to our template. Very important to do. To verify our sink location, remember, we had marked here 14 inches from the edge is where the sink would line up. So I'm just going to double confirm that that's where the sink is going. So I'll take a pencil from the template, lined up to the right edge, and just make a mark. I can take my template down, take a square, lay it across my line, and this will be the outer edge of the sink. We're going to take our cutting board knockout. Remember, it was 14 inches from the edge, so now I'm lining it up with the front, and it's marked. So I know that this is the front, and we're determining this is the front edge. And yes, it lines up with 14 inches to our drawing. So that tells me exactly where the sink is going to be located. And this is a great time-saving device. We used to make sink knockouts out of MDF and plywood, cut them out, and make individual ones. We have these very convenient sink knockouts made out of foam, pre-made for undermount stainless steel sinks. Now, they are lined with a plastic so that they give a nice finish. And there is a seam. So we want that seam to be hidden from the user. Since I know that this is the front of my counter, even though it's upside down, I'm going to place the seam toward the front edge. That way you can't see it all the time when you're looking over your sink. Place my sink knockout. It's lined up with the square line that I came off with. Take a marking pencil and just scribe around. Okay, so I've just marked the sink knockout location. And I'll set that aside, and now we need to set our faucets. This little device is going to save you a lot of time. We came up with this because before, to make faucet knockouts, we had to make them out of wood dowels. Now we have these pre-made rubber knockouts that we've devised, and it makes it so convenient because we are going to mount this in our mold and drill through here, and it will just stay in there, and you'll be able to mount your faucet with this large area for the bushing. Okay, so this is the center line, 6 inches out, 6 inches out on either side. We're going to put another knockout. So I'm going to take my square, come in, and we've determined that we want to have this in the center. So this is approximately 5.5, so 2 3/4 inches in. I'm going to make a little mark. And on here, 2 3/4 inches in, I'm going to make a little mark. And that's going to give me the marks for pre-drilling these little holes. Okay, so now we're ready to assemble our mold. And in order to do so, we want to put our sides up and screw them into the main body of the mold. Now, we have to be very, very careful here because this is the finished surface of the mold. And I'm going to be screwing in the sides here, and I want to make sure that the screws don't protrude or break the surface that is our precious surface of pouring onto. So I'm going to mark the outside with a line, and that'll prevent me from missing when I'm screwing. I'm going to take a scrap piece of melamine, place it up against the side. Okay, I've marked my line, and there it is. So this assures me that when I screw in, I'm going to stay below that line and not compromise the surface of the mold. So I'm going to take this piece of scrap melamine and go around lifting these up. This is kind of a good idea to keep everything in the same place. Then you don't get so confused as to where things are located. So I'm just going around marking that scribe line, and that tells me exactly where I need to screw in. We take our countersink drill bit. It's made for 1.5 inch screw, 1.5 to 1 5/8. And we're going to drill every 6 to 8 inches along the perimeter of the sides of the mold. And I'm going to start a few inches in from the corner and make sure that you are lined up in the center and that you are drilling straight down in order that you don't come into the surface of the mold. So I'm going to start and drill sufficiently so that I know that screw head is going to be countersunk flush. And then I use my drill just as a sort of rough measurement. It doesn't have to be that precise. And I'm going to drill again. Okay, and then use the drill again. And I'm going to proceed in the same manner all the way around the countertop mold. Okay, I've drilled that in. It's nice and flush. Okay, it's set. And now that gives me the freedom to pre-drill the rest of the holes without having to worry about lineup. I drill, and try to be cognizant that you want to keep the drill relatively level as you drill in. Now, I've got them all pre-drilled here. I'm going to take my number 8 screws, come in, make sure it's nice and cinched up, nice and flush. Drill. Cinched up. Every once in a while, check on the back side. Make sure it's nice and tight. Okay, we have finished assembling the mold and it's sitting on the table. We're ready to brace it. And bracing is so important because the bracing is what prevents these forms from bowing, from moving around when we set in the concrete and vibrate. And they also provide alignment when we have to bring these two pieces together for our separation. So what we've done is we made what we call backer boards. It's basically just melamine, and we have to make sure that the sides are perpendicular and it sits nice and flat and straight. So the first thing I'm going to do is align this up so that it will reinforce this. And it doesn't matter exactly where on the table, but you kind of want it in the center. I'm going to take my regular 1 5/8 screws and start at one end and screw it into the table. Okay, I finished screwing down the backer board, and now I'm ready to pull in and screw the sides of the mold to the backer board. But at this time, I've been using 1 5/8 screws, generally speaking. Now this is critical not to use these screws to screw these two pieces together at this time, because you'll go right through the side of your mold and that will appear in the countertop. So set aside special 1 1/4 screws, because with these 1 1/4 screws you're not going to pass through the surface of the side of the mold. Okay, now I've secured the last screw just before the break, and I'm going to do the same thing, bracing, putting the screws down on the bracing all the way around and on the end. I'm going to leave this end open, and I'll show you why. Our next step is to align our brake. And as you can see here, I can slide this piece now and everything is lined up perfectly. The sides haven't been screwed in here because I want to push this in and set our divider before I cinch up these screws. Okay, we're ready to set the divider. And for a divider, we use 1/8" plexiglass, which you can get at any hardware store. And we're going to set it against the piece that's secure. This is the side of the mold that's secure. This is the side of the mold that still slides, and you see there, it's just pinched nicely and holds itself well right between the two molds. It's a little bit flexible, but that's okay because it will mirror any kind of undulation and it'll make a perfect fit no matter what. What we're going to do is then caulk in this piece of plexiglass. And in order to do that without making a big mess, I'm going to pull this out, leave my plexiglass aside. I'm going to push this back in. So this is a very quick way to prevent a big mess with the caulk. What I'm going to do is take a single edge razor blade and just carefully fit it into the crack. Okay, and then I will cut it off here at the end. I'm going to pull this apart, and there I have the tape, which will prevent a lot of mess from getting onto the surface of our mold. To caulk, we use pure silicone. Don't use an acrylic caulk because it won't seat itself well and the concrete doesn't separate as easily. We also use black because it's easy for us to see. It won't matter in terms of the finished product, but it's easy to see, and so if you goop some on and it gets over anything, then you'll be able to readily clean it up. So I'm going to go along and spread a little of our silicone into the side here, just like that, just keeping it as even as I can. And make sure you get the upper sides as well. Okay. And then I'll just take a single edge razor blade and I'll move in and just spread that silicone, a thin coat right inside. Like that, and you see some of it kind of spills over. I don't know if you can see this, but there we go. Now I'm just running my blade, getting an even coat, and going back over areas that I've missed. Okay, now I've done the same to the other side, so I'm ready to pull the tape and insert my plexiglass. So that creates a nice clean surface for me to start with. Now I'm ready to set a piece of plexiglass in, and I'm going to just carefully put it in, cinch it up, and I'm ready to push the two pieces together. And now I can squeeze the piece together. There we go. It's ready to go. We're ready now to set the cutting board knockout. And if you notice, this knockout has some packing tape and foam. It's just light packing foam, white foam, and it's been taped to the edge, here and here. Now to make this edge, I simply take spray adhesive and spray it onto the foam. Not onto the knockout, but onto the foam. Then carefully place the foam onto the knockout, even it out, cut with a razor blade, trim the edges, making sure that we don't create any kind of wrinkles. Now I take ordinary packing tape, transparent packing tape, and again, carefully smooth out any wrinkles because we don't want any of those wrinkles coming through to the finished countertop. Wrap it around and then trim with the razor blade. Now, if you don't happen to have packing foam, you can always use ordinary cardboard. Corrugated cardboard, trimmed to size, placed on the edge, and then you use the packing tape just like we did with the packing foam. Smooth it over, make sure all the wrinkles are out. Now the reason we do this is because this piece, as it sets in, the concrete seeps around it and it's sort of locked in, and the concrete is shrinking ever so slightly. So we want that concrete to be able to shrink onto this little bit of a cushion. It's very important to do that, otherwise this piece will be very hard to get out. So I've marked front here, so I know that this is the front. It's aligned with the markings I had on the bottom of the mold. And I'm simply going to take some silicone and leave myself a little bit of room around the edge. And this is merely to glue this piece down because we are going to caulk all the edges. So this is just basically to have this piece stick to the mold, but not so tenaciously that we can't pull it apart. So I'm going to carefully line this, stick it, press it, pound it a little bit, and then we're done. Now that gives me the alignment for the sink knockout. And remember that we have a slight seam here. So I'm going to take a little bit, tiny bit of caulk. There. Take my little razor blade, sort of fill that little joint there so that it just minimizes the seam line. Now remember, we decided that this seam would face the front, so I have marked front here, and we're going to put the piece and align it, and it looks good, everything looks good. So I'm going to put my silicone around the edges. Lastly. Okay. All right. Just swirl it in. I used to be a pastry chef. And then look for the front. Stick it down very carefully. And again, pressing toward the cutting board knockout so that it's certain to have line up. Check all your lines. Give it a firm pressing, and that's it. I'm going to take my blue tape and place it along each side about 1/8 of an inch from the corner of the joint here, and carefully keep that constant 1/8 of an inch. And this is acting as a mask, just like we did at the joint, and prevent a big mess when we caulk. Why do we caulk? Well, we don't want the water from the concrete to seep into our crack there because it'll swell. And that will cause a deformation in the form, which then will affect the finished countertop. So this is what we do, is that we're going to caulk inside here, put a bead of caulk, but I'm going to protect both sides by placing the tape right evenly and leaving a nice 1/8 inch on either side. Okay, we've taped all around our mold. Now we're ready to caulk, and this caulking gives that nice beaded edge. It's very easy to do. Just make sure, just like in painting, prep is everything. And then I go in with my caulking gun and just lay a small bead. You actually don't need quite as much as you might think, because you're going to be spreading this out. Okay, so you want to make sure that you get the verticals. I've gotten all around. I'm checking to make sure I have enough caulk there. And I'm going to take the very specialized tool, which comes with a lot of experience, which is this index finger. Put a little, moisten it a bit. I'm going to take that finger and just very quickly and evenly squish out. And what you want to do is do it once. You want to not go over and over it again and again. And you just push out like that. The radius is controlled by how much pressure you put on your finger. If you squeeze out more, then you're going to have a smaller radius. If you leave your finger and do it lightly, you're going to have a larger radius. Okay, now I've just caulked around this edge of the perimeter because that's how much I can do before the caulk sets up. And remember, if you see little aberrations here or there, don't worry about it so much. But the cardinal sin is to go over and over and over trying to perfect the caulk. Now what I'm going to do is pull up my tape, and you can see that we have a nice clean line there. And I will pull up the other side. Now always remember to try to pull slightly toward the caulk so you don't pull out the caulk. If you have too much caulk on there and you start pulling away, it's going to leave a little bit bigger mess. And remember, always work enough caulk that you can get to it while it's still wet. Don't overdo it and try to do the entire piece and then come back and pull the tape. If there are little funnies once in a while, if you see a little piece of dirt or something getting in there, those can be taken care of later after the concrete piece is cured. We finished caulking all the way around. Now, one important point. Do not put caulking on the dividers. These will come together and we want it to be flush on the surface at the end. So no need to caulk in here. Yet make sure that there isn't any caulk squished out. Clean it all up nice and neat. You can see that there's no residue. Now the next thing, we're going to come around and I'm going to put in my faucet knockouts. These have a screw on the center head there, and they're going to go all the way through. And remember, we had our marks. So I'm going to pre-drill with the same drill bit that was the countersunk drill bit, and carefully go to my mark. Okay, now remember, you don't have to countersink at this point, but be careful. The sawdust, the little residue sawdust, doesn't scatter over any wet caulking, because it'll stick and then that'll show up in the countertop. Any sawdust that gets into the mold can just be vacuumed up with a shop vac. This is the exciting moment. This is the artistic moment. This is what distinguishes concrete countertop making from your ordinary countertop. It's your imagination, what you decide to put in these inlays, where you put them, what you use. It's just up to your imagination. For example, this is just an automatic transmission car part, gotten at the local junkyard, filled in a little bit. And these kind of things you can shop around when you're at your store and find different things, coins, rings, bracelets, things like that. Anything you want to put in, you can put in on the surface as long as it's flat. And this, for example, is a piece of leopard rock from a local gem store, gem and rock store, very inexpensive. So we want to overlook the whole thing and decide how are you going to compose this. And what's really nice at this stage is you can dry fit the whole thing. So maybe I'll put something up against this and something here. I take my little pieces of jadeite, which again from a rock store, and just start maybe putting something here and there, maybe something here, something over here. Work in, and you know, this is where you take a survey, look at it in real time. Remember that the whole thing is going to be flipped over. So this arrangement, I'm remembering, let's see, I'll be standing by the sink, and to my flipped over to my right side, I can look, and maybe this will be a nice focus here. So oftentimes on a division like this, I like to emphasize and make a composition out of the division instead of sort of denying that it's there. I actually accentuate it a bit. Let's see, maybe these coming out of the edges would be a little bit nicer. Now, we also have our prepackaged little semi-precious stones. And these are for scattering on the countertop. For instance, here we have blue glass. Beautiful, it's very reflective. Here we have cornelian, kind of an orange cast. These are available in prepackaged, small, convenient, and very, very nice to personalize your countertop. Okay, now I've just marked the larger pieces so that I know sort of where I like them before. I'm going to take them, and just like with our inset of the sink, I am going to squeeze just a small amount of silicone, and I'm going to spread this as thin as I can and not goop too much on the edges yet. Okay, I'm going to just spread, and we're going to fade it out toward the edge from the center. And it's important to get it fairly even because we don't want any cement creeping its way back underneath this piece. So again, just thin layers and stroking away so that there's not too much on the edges. Because when I push this down, I don't want to see a lot of silicone squeezing out. Then it becomes a big cleaning hassle. So I marked right here. I'm going to just lay it down and just push it up against the divide. Okay, I'm going to take my piece of leopard rock, and see, this is where marking it is good because now I know my orientation, and it's going to go, yep, just like this. So this is the bottom side, and this is nice and flat. I'm going to squeeze a little caulking, and again, black is good because I can see where the silicone is. If I use clear silicone, it's kind of hard to see, and sometimes you'll miss spots or you'll get a big glop that you didn't know was there. So carefully and as little movement as possible, just drop it down. Give it a little bit of a push, and then that's going to set up. Now I'm going to go around and take my razor blade and take these little pieces and do the same thing. Just a little bit of silicone on each piece and clean it up and place it down. Now, there is a tendency when you have all these wonderful materials to use to go overboard. And I suggest that a little restraint is not a bad thing here. We're using a wine-colored concrete, and I feel that the jadeite would be a nice contrast, and so we've used some larger pieces of jadeite. We're going to reinforce that with our little packaged jadeite, which does have a few other colors in it, and they'll come out. So we're going to put the beach wash glass and the carnelian aside, and we're going to scatter these. Now, these are polished stones. I'm going to take my spray adhesive and spray very lightly over the piece, and then just simply scatter. And where they stick, they will stick. Maybe give it a little bit more here. And scatter. You can see they stop in their tracks. When they stop in their tracks, you know that they're sticking to the adhesive. Okay? Just like that. Now, what we want to do is find a rhythm. If you want to put a few more stones here, then put a few more stones. And don't worry about there won't be anything over here. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and spray other areas and scatter a little bit, and knowing that I'm going to lose some, but that's okay. We finished up with our decorative aggregates and our inlays, so now we're ready for the rebar cage. Now, rebar is an important component in a countertop because we have thin areas here that need reinforcing. These are areas with less concrete in them. So this is going to span the front of a sink-based cabinet, and we need some reinforcing here. This reinforcement, or rebar, comes in various diameters. Now, we like to use a combination of 3/8 inch rebar and 6-inch wire mesh. To make your rebar cage, you'll need rebar benders that you can find at any rental supply yard. Or if you want, you can bend the rebar with small sections of 1/2-inch galvanized pipe. Either way, it's a pretty straightforward operation. Just make sure to keep the cage as flat as possible. An important thing to remember is to build your cage so it lays 2 inches inside the walls of the mold. In our case, a 42-inch length mold means that we bend the rebar at 38 inches. Begin bending, and as with everything, go slowly and take your time. Remember, measure twice, bend once. Once you've built the frame, lay the 6-inch wire mesh on top. Then, use tie wire to secure it to the frame. If you don't have pre-made ties, you can snip off some pieces of baling wire and they'll do the job just fine. Now clip or saw off the overhanging wire mesh. Finally, attach some wire to the corner of each section. We'll use these later to hang and secure the cage in the mold. So here's our rebar cage, and we're going to lay this in, and careful not to disturb the pieces, the sink knockout, the faucet knockouts, and I see that it's going to fit fine, but I don't want to drop it right into the mold right now. I'm going to use some blue foam, or just ubiquitous blue foam, and set it in, kind of avoiding the aggregate if you can, so that it holds the rebar off the surface of the mold. And we use this so that we can set the height of the rebar. That height is very critical. we want it away from the surface at least 3/4 of an inch, because if the rebar is too close to the top surface of the countertop, you're going to get ghosting. You'll see the pattern of the rebar when you do your finished countertop. I'm ready now to tie down the wire, and this will suspend the rebar cage, and just wrap the wire around. You don't have to worry about tying it up too tight yet, and just there. Okay, just go around and tie all the wire up. Now I'm going to check, make sure that I'm covering the right distances from the edges, and double check to see that my rebar isn't pushing up against my faucet knockouts. Looks pretty good, but I think it could use a little of adjustment. So this one's a little bit tight there. I'm going to readjust by pulling this away, and I got a little stretch here. Good. Cinch this down. There. Now there's good clearance, and at least 1.5 inches to 2 inches from the back surface. And go around, double check everything. Looks pretty even. Now I'm ready. Just going to pull my blocks out. This is a great trick I've learned over the years. Take clear packing tape, cover all your screw heads. And you can just do this by just running your tape right over. And this protects the screw heads from the concrete that will spill over, and that way you won't lose them, and you don't get cement hardening in the Phillips head so that you can't unscrew them. Okay, now we're ready to get our hands dirty. What I have assembled here in our mixing room are all the ingredients you're going to need to pour your countertop. Right here are bagged concrete, 5,000 psi bagged concrete. These are available in most hardware stores around the country. And we have a trash can to hold any excess or any overages of your concrete, shovel, 5-gallon buckets, wheelbarrow, and this essential piece of equipment, the 12 cubic foot mixer. This one happens to be gas fired, but you can also use an electric one. These are also available at rental yards all over. The second most important ingredient is water, and water is all pre-measured because we don't want to have any guesswork involved when it comes to the water. Of course, gloves and a mask. Very important in mixing concrete. Safety is a critical component of what we do, so wear your mask. And now this is the critical component, the concrete countertop pro formula mix. Now we're using the 3 cubic foot box because remember our countertop was measured out at 2.7 cubic feet and we want a little overage, so 3 cubic feet is just about perfect. In this box are 3 sacks, and in these 3 sacks are all the ingredients you need to make the ordinary concrete into a superlative concrete for countertops. After all the hard work we put into the mold, it would be a shame to have something go wrong with the pour. So when you begin the mixing and pouring process, it's a good idea to have at least one other person helping you out. Okay, our 3 cubic feet of sacked concrete is in the mixer. So now all we have to do is add the pro formula. I'll take my sack, cut it open, just place it in carefully. Each time, just check to make sure that the mix is well consolidated to the rear of the mixer. It's as simple as that. Okay, I'm going to take this plastic and some bungee cords, and we're going to dry mix this. We're going to dry mix this around so that all the ingredients will get consolidated and mixed evenly inside the mixer before we add the water. And that's going to prevent the dust from going all over the place. The mixer we will be using is a 12 cubic foot Eimer mixer. You need at least a 9 cubic foot mixer to do a batch this size comfortably. Okay, we're going to take a look and see if our consolidation, you have to be careful, and looks really good. Everything is homogenized quite nicely. You don't see any clumping. All right, we're ready for that critical ingredient, water. For the Pro Formula mix, we will initially add 1 gallon of water for each cubic foot of mix. Now, it will appear dry at first, but let this tumble around in the mixer for at least 5 minutes. After that, add water slowly and in small doses until you get the right consistency. Even though it looks dry, refrain from adding too much water too soon. The whole mix process will take from 10 to 15 minutes. At this point, it's a really good idea to get a feel for the material. It should have the consistency of runny oatmeal. Once you're through mixing, the clock is running, so be sure everything is laid out and ready at your mold table. Seems like it's just about the right consistency here, and it's going to feel real plasticky because of the water reducing agent in here and the fibers. So you can see how viscous and sticky it is. Okay, I'm going to work with my hands. Try to work it into the corners. What you don't want to do is trap air. That's important. So as he pours it out, I'm going to work it around. And you can see how it flows. It's very sticky feeling. That's okay. But you have to work with some deliberation, and you don't have tremendous amount of time. Okay, I am using my fingers, sensitive, around the knockouts here, just giving a little squeeze, seeing where it flows, trying not to trap any air pockets. Okay, right over here, Justin, please. Okay. Now, we have this piece while Justin is filling up the other half. I've got this piece just about, 2/3 of the way filled, maybe a little bit more, and looking good. So I'm going to start vibrating this piece, and I'll take the vibrator here. I'm going to let Justin go ahead and keep filling over there. Now, this vibrator, it's called a pencil vibrator, and it's available usually at any rental yard, tool rental yard. They'll have a device like this. And it's really important not to use this too aggressively against your inlays, and don't knock things around. So what we're going to do is lay some plastic and cover the piece as I'm vibrating. This plastic sheeting is kind of up to you. It sometimes can get in the way, but also the vibrator will splatter the concrete. So I like to put this plastic down and just hold it over the vibrator, moving it back and forth. Okay, remember now, watch the vibrator. Remember the location of your inlays, because if the vibrator hits them, they may work free. Okay, so we've done a preliminary vibration throughout the whole piece. And now we're going to finish pouring over here. I'm going to make sure that my concrete is working itself into the corners. And especially around inlays, you have to be careful. And as you can see, the mix is starting to stiffen up a little more. Still flowing, but you can't dally around. You can't dilly-dally at this stage. And you never want to pour more countertop than you can do within, 25, 30 minutes. Okay, so that's a real important thing. If you have if you have longer sections, that's why we have divisions. Now I know that my main inlay is in here, and I don't want to aggressively push this vibrator over it. So I'm going to now, it's about 2/3 the way full, and I'm going to make sure that there's good consolidation all the way around. If you have a little flex in your table, sometimes you can just move it like that. You can see it's just like a big bowl of Jell-O, and that helps get some of that liquefaction and consolidation in your piece. Looking pretty good. It looks like we're just about the right level. You can see what I mean here about the knockouts not being down too low. They're just perfect right now. And you're always going to have a little extra concrete, and we always like you to calculate a little overage so that you don't run short. So I always suggest that we have ready on hand some little pieces, like you can make some stepping stones or maybe a little mini countertop somewhere, and have these ready so that you can use up the last little bit of surplus concrete and make something out of it instead of just letting it to go to waste. What we're going to do now is do the screeding, and screeding is to just simply level and get rid of the excess concrete. Okay, so we want to go to the level of the piece and just work our way and then gather up the extra. And kind of be careful around the sink knockout. We don't want to disengage the plastic that is around the sink knockouts. Once you finish screeding and things look pretty good, we're going to just go through a cleanup and run the spatula along, and of course all the screws have been protected with our cellophane. Once the concrete is stiffened up for a couple of hours, you can come back and then clip off the rebar wires. Then just press the wire down into the hardening concrete. Now all we do is let it cure for 4 days. Here we are, 4 days later. This is the moment I always anticipate. It's sort of like a potter waiting for a pot to come out of the kiln. We've set this up so it'll be very easy to strip, but you have to take precautions because this is a newborn baby and we don't want to disrupt it too much. Things are delicate here. I'm going to start by removing the screws on the backer boards, which hold, of course, the mold tight to the concrete counter. And you'll notice that whenever we have a pour, there's going to be spillage, and the screw heads will, of course, get covered up. But with our Little tried and true trick here. We make it really easy to just pull up the tape, and you can see the slurry just comes off naturally. And there we go. So, nice clean screw heads. We always like that. Okay, so we are going to make sure, we have to make sure that we carefully remove every screw, because if one is lodged in there, it may stress when you try to pull out the board forms. Okay. I'm going to take my pry bar, my small pry bar, and start working off the backer boards that we've just released. So work under here, work against the side, gently pry, and see it's a little bit sticky, but they usually come off fairly easy. I'm going to take my drill gun and then remove the screws. And these screws are screwed into the bottom of the mold. So we just want to be a little careful here. Release them. And these rubber faucet knockouts are reusable. So this is where we start to be a little bit careful. Now you can pry against the concrete here, because after all, the only person who's going to see any kind of chip outs here is going to be the plumber. But we don't want to use excessive force because the cracking might occur across these weak points. So when you pry, make sure you're not prying against the weak side of the countertop. Against the sink here, this small area here, these narrow channels, or against the back here. So we want to make sure that the leverage we use to take out these faucet knockouts are indeed strong of themselves. Okay. So you can see that the faucet knockout releases very easily, and these are absolutely reusable. So we'll set those aside and go to the next one. Okay, let's see how this one comes up. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to work my way around and take off the screws which hold the actual mold together. And here's where, again, be careful and methodical. Make sure that you get and reach every screw so that you don't end up prying against these form boards unnecessarily with unnecessary force when you have a screw lodged in there that you forgot. Now at this time, we want to carefully remove these boards. Sometimes they come off very easily, sometimes they'll be a little stubborn. So have in preparation some simple wooden shims, and of course our little pry bar, a little bit larger pry bar. Have a hammer. Hopefully we won't have to use this, but sometimes some things get stubborn. You might have to ease and wedge the wood in and just tap it lightly to just get some purchase so that you can pull these off. So always start right at the corner, wood to wood. So you're not prying against the concrete at first. Okay. So I'm going to ease my small shim, give it a little hammer. I can see it's coming off nicely. Give it a little pry, gently, gently. I've got it opened up. And then very carefully pulling and easing it off. And see how easy it is? And you'll see the little Spider-Man web here from the caulking. Let me just pull that off. And this is when you get your first indication of how well you did as far as vibration. You can see here we don't have any bug holes, no little voids. So So far, so good. Looks good. And we continue working our way around the piece. I've worked my way around to the end pieces, and here you have to be a little cautious. If the board is stubborn, don't pry against the concrete itself, but try to pry against the bottom of the mold. So what we need to do is just work the corner and then take a little shim, a little wood shim, and ease it in and drive the shim against the bottom of the form. And there we go. It's easing it open nicely. Shim. And there we go. Good release. Now that we've gone around and removed all the form boards, you'll notice that the edge is very, very sharp. And we want to ease these edges so that when we're flipping this over, it doesn't catch against anything and cause perhaps a chip out, which will expand itself down onto the face, which you will see. So we need to be careful here with these edges. Now, one way to do it is to use a common stone, which is used for easing edges of stone and masonry. It's a masonry stone, and we can use this to scrape down the edge. Another way is to take these diamond pads, these hand diamond pads, and kind of use a worn one that you have used already for other purposes. And we use these to just gently ease these edges. They make a great tool for that. And it's just like sanding wood. I mean, it's that easy. So you can see now it's dulled. And that's about all you have to do. Just now, as I'm sanding, there's one important point to remember. Just like when you're sanding or planing wood, you don't want to go off a corner and come backward toward a corner like this, because if there's an edge to catch, it may cause the piece to catch and break open a corner. So work your way in from the outside away from the corner. Rather than coming this way on this side, I will come this way and ease in. That way I'm pushing against the grain, so to speak, and this corner will be safe from chipping out. Now we're here at the Olympic moment. This is the clean and jerk. We have a piece, combined weight maybe 250 pounds, so that's the reason why we divided. We put a divider here and we have two separate pieces. This piece is probably 100 pounds. This one might be 150 pounds. And we want to gently take this piece up and lift it so that we can take off the bottom form board. Right now I'm going to have my assistant Justin come over, and we are going to ease this piece this way, being very careful not to pinch this corner, right? So there we go. Helps to have somebody this size, doesn't it? Okay. Now we're going to move this over and put it close to the edge here so we have a tipping point, and then we'll use the foam. Okay, I'm pulling it over, and now we have a place where we can ease this up and over. Make sure there's no obstructions. Nobody's going to get their hands compromised in any way. And take this foam. Okay. Okay, so we're going to hoist up. All right. I'm going to work my way around. We're going to ease it down, and I have plenty of room. My fingers aren't going to be pinched, and there we go. Now we're getting ready to pull this piece up. Our plexiglass divide here is releasing itself nicely, so we just want to ease this off before we flip. And now we're going to be very careful. Now this piece doesn't have a drain board or any feature to lock it in, so they may shear and slip off. So we have to be careful, sort of holding the piece, making sure that we're taking them together because the concrete may drop all of a sudden. So, and indeed, that's what's happening here. I can feel it. So we should ease it and hold it, okay? And our fingers are clear, making sure your fingers are clear. There we go. Okay. Now, as you can see here, there's a board below the level of the concrete here, so that's locking it in, and we don't want to lever against that. So I'm going to ease these two boards apart, trying to split them apart. I'm going to take a my trusty little wedge here, and ease it in, and just pry gently. So now I have some purchase against the bottom piece, and I can then just start to lift straight up on this board. And carefully, we lift up. There we go. Now, do not be alarmed. This is like a newborn baby. They are not very pretty when they first come out. But with the processes that we do, the polishing and the easing up and cleaning up these edges, believe you me, this will be something that you'll be proud of. So here we have our cutting board knockout, and sometimes they're rather stubborn. So we can't pry against the concrete. In a case where it's stubborn, we might take a screwdriver and drive it right through the MDF. Okay, now we've eased it in here, and we're going to gently pull. And there we go. Careful not to lever against anything. Ease it back out, and there we go. Knockouts come out. Beginning to see some of our little inlays. Gently, gently, gently pull up. There we go. Beautiful. Now we're at the point we're going to push the sink knockout through. And I'd just like to reiterate that it's so important. We've taken it from the mold. It's like a newborn baby, and it requires delicacy. Whether you're trying to remove a cutting board knockout or faucet knockouts or the sink knockout, or you're moving it around, just use extreme delicacy. If you find something is stubborn and refuses to come out, just ease back, think about it, think how you can work it, and eventually it will come out. Worst came to worst, you can just break through. Let's say if this sink knockout was especially stubborn or something stuck, you can cut through this and then collapse it and bring it out. Always think for the finished piece, not about the knockout. Let's move this up, push it up forward. Yeah. Okay. And gently hold it. Now, I'm going to just give it a little pounding on the corners. Make sure it comes out evenly. And again, check to make sure that nothing is sticking. This is where you can practice some of the martial arts there. Okay, have you got it, Justin? Okay. There we go. Right through. Everything's perfect. Welcome to the grinding area. Here are the essential tools that you'll need to make this newborn baby into a beautiful child, so to speak. And we're going to start with the grinder. It's got a central water feed, but it's not absolutely essential that you have this sophisticated tool. If you go to your rental yard and rent a regular grinder, you can solve the water feed problem by just taking an old plastic jar, poking a few holes in it, filling it up with water, and voila, a water feed. Okay? And this you would put down on your countertop when you're going to use the grinder, and you would just grind in front and just move this around so that you're constantly saturating the area in front of your grinder. Another essential tool, would be a squeegee, a simple squeegee, so that you can scrape away and sort of ascertain at what level you've been grinding. Now, we've been talking about grinding. What do you grind with? These are the pads. Now, these are varying grits that are available: 50, 100, 200, 400, 800, and 1500. Each one of these represents a coarseness, and if you take a very aggressive pad like 50, you'll get a lot of the aggregate to show. If you go to 100, a little less, 200, a little less, 400, etc. So if you want to show, expose a lot of the aggregate in the piece, then you will start with a 50 grit. Okay, before we talk about grinding, let's talk about safety. After all, we're working with water and electricity. This is an essential piece of equipment, a GFI. Make sure you get one at the local hardware store. It's very inexpensive and well worth it. Make sure you're working with a double insulated tool. Make sure that it has a 3-prong outlet. Make sure your outlet is grounded. Now, when you're working around the water, if there's going to be any pooling, make sure that you have a pair of boots, and it's always a good idea to have heavy-duty rubber gloves on hand as well. Let's talk about the grinder now. You'll notice the pads have a hole, and that hole allows the water to come through here and evenly saturate the piece while you're grinding. The RPM, that's very important. What we want is something around 900 to 3000 RPM. So check to make sure that if you get a variable speed that it can have that range and that you can control that. That's very important for even grinding. So we're ready to start grinding our piece. And I'm going to start with the 50 grit pad. Now 50 grit is going to be in this range. We're going to try to grind down rather aggressively and show a lot of the aggregate. This aggregate I'm talking about is not our decorative aggregate, it's the aggregate that's actually in the mix, in the sackcrete. So in addition to our aggregate, we're going to see additional aggregate that's naturally in the sackcrete. Okay, I'm going to put my pad on like that, and there it's, the hole is centered, and we're going to start grinding. We want to take this very, very, very evenly across, sort of like you're doing a meticulous lawn job, going back and forth in rows and overlapping. Don't want to put too much pressure, and you want to hold the grinding wheel as flat as possible. Now you notice I'm crossing over the divide, and we shimmed it up so it's very, very smooth and even there. That's what we want, a very flush countertop. Okay, let's check. See. All right. Let's just take a look at the contrast between the areas that I didn't grind and the areas that I've ground, so you get an idea. Squeegee this all off. And you'll notice this is unground, this is ground, and we can begin to see some of the fines appearing in various areas. Now, I have a lot more grinding to do, but within just a minute or two, we already took off that very first layer. And you'll notice how it's cleaned up the transmission part and the leopard rock pretty nicely, and you begin to see things starting to appear. And we should start to see a little bit. Here's like a few of our decorative aggregates, and they're starting to appear. Well, as you do this more and more, you'll just see more and more things coming up. It's a very exciting part. Now just move on up through the various grinding pads. Make sure you keep even, steady pressure. Once you've moved up through the various pads from 50 grit to 400 grit, it's time to make a decision. And the decision is whether or not to slurry. Now what is slurrying? To slurry is simply to fill voids or holes that may appear because of air pockets or whatnot that come onto the surface of the countertop. Now in some cases, the slurry may not do the trick the first time. Not to worry. Here's an example, a good example of a piece where the white areas were the original holes. We slurried with the white just to show you how much it would cover, and after 2 days we ground it and there were still slight depressions. But we went back and filled it in black just to show you how the black will then fill in those depressions on the second coat and take care of it. In fact, some people like to use this technique deliberately for a particular look, to get this kind of splattered paint look on their countertop. So the slurry comes in a little container like this. You just add 7 ounces of water to the entire container, stir it up, and you put a toothpaste-like consistency over the whole countertop. Now aesthetically, we usually don't fill holes that appear on the sides of a countertop, as they kind of show the depth and the character of the material. Squeegee off the slurry into your bucket. Go slowly and just keep applying the slurry and keep squeegeeing off as you go. Finally, just wipe off any remaining residue. After 2 days, you can come back to the slurry and grind it off with the same grinding disc that you left off with. In this case, we're using the 400 grit disc. Sometimes holes might appear that are too big to be filled with 1 coat of slurry. If you notice this, just repeat this process after you grind off the first slurry coat. So again, move up through the grinding pads from 400 grit all the way up to 1500. It's also a good idea to stop now and then and use your squeegee to clean up and reveal your progress as you go. If you began with the 50 grit, this will bring up the stones and the aggregates, and you'll see they'll get more and more visible as you grind longer and longer. Well, that's it. It's beautiful. We're finished up with the 1500 grit, and we're going to clean this off, let it dry, and seal and wax. Now we've come to the part of the process of finishing. And in Chinese painting, sometimes we call this painting in the dragon's eye. That is, bringing it to life. And we're going to bring it to life with our concrete sealer. And this is a non-toxic, food-safe sealer that we apply to the countertop, our wax, and our polish. Now, concrete really needs to be sealed. That's very important. It has the porosity of marble. And if it's not sealed, when you have orange juice or any number of ingredients like vinegars and acids and things like that on the countertop, it will stain or mar the countertop. So this is the protection that you need to make this countertop last for a long time and look unblemished. In order to get a streak-free finish, take a sponge or a clean cloth and saturate the entire concrete surface with clean water to allow it to penetrate. Then, use a container, mix equal parts clean water and sealer. Apply this 50% solution for a solid 5 minutes so the entire surface gets saturated evenly. Now, gradually start increasing the ratio of the sealer to water for the next 5 minutes and continue to spread the mixture out over the countertop. Keep moving your rag to avoid dry pockets. Eventually, you're pouring 100% solution onto your rag. As the sealer begins to disperse into the concrete, wipe up all the remaining sealer with a damp rag. Try to keep things even as you wipe off the sealer. Apply a second coat 30 minutes after the first coat. For best results and best resistance, wait 48 hours for a maximum cure before waxing. Once the sealer has fully cured, you can apply the carnauba wax. This adds another layer of protection and also brings out more luster in the surface. If you've ever waxed a car, you already know the basics, and waxing a countertop isn't much different. Apply the wax in small areas that you can comfortably reach at one time. After you let the wax dry for 2 or 3 minutes, wipe off any excess film that you might see. After waxing, polish it out with a chamois cloth, or I prefer a buffer, and just repeat this process 2 to 3 times. And here we have it. This is a great example of what's possible with good craftsmanship and a sense of good design. The only thing left now is for us to install the countertop, add the sink and faucets, and the cutting board. Now, if you want further inspiration, you might want to go to my website, chengdesign.com or concreteexchange.com, and there you'll see examples of work that I've done over the last 20 years in various kitchens and settings, and that can serve as an inspiration maybe for your work. If you'd like to purchase the Pro Formula, faucet and sink knockouts, or any of the other products we use to make our countertops, or if you'd like to participate in an exciting hands-on 1-day basic or 5-day advanced workshop, just visit our website at concreteexchange.com. We are far more creative than we give ourselves credit for, and concrete is a wonderful medium to express our own designs. Just remember, a piece like this, full of life, can become the centerpiece of any kitchen and give you a sense of timeless beauty for years to come.